Hi, I'm Brandon Paiva, lead advocate here at Chisholm, Kilpatrick, and today, with me, I am joined by Lucas Silvia, who is an attorney here at CCK. So mental health is a serious and important topic for us. Today, we're going to break down what you need to know about anxiety and depression and how they may impact your VA disability ratings. Now, remember, if you or someone you know is a veteran in crisis, dial 988 for immediate help. All right, Lucas, so let's dive in. As we know, many veterans actually may or may not know or suspect that they suffer from both depression and anxiety. Now, if we have a veteran who suffers from these conditions, do they have to file a separate claim for each for depression and anxiety?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Brandon, and thanks for having us, come together and kind of talk about this a little bit today because it is complicated and it's tough. VA has a broad duty to interpret a veteran's claim. There's a lot of principles that undergird that, but one of them is simply that a veteran is not typically a medical expert. So as long as you are describing the symptoms of your condition, especially with mental health conditions, you can consider symptoms like anxiety, depression. Really, it runs the gambit. And just because you may not know your specific diagnoses or you have more than one, you don't have to file a claim for each one. I would recommend that if you are suffering from multiple symptoms and you're not sure, to list those symptoms out in the same claim form itself to kind of protect yourself as much as possible. But VA is supposed to take a broad view of your claim. There's a case, Clemens v. Shinseki, that talks about this, kind of explaining what I had just kind of gone over. There's other case law that talks about this principle as well. But you're not supposed to be locked into a specific diagnosis if that's what you claim, given that you're not a medical expert. You're not competent to make those sorts of evaluations, but you are competent to talk about the symptoms that you're feeling, the symptoms that you're observing, and that's really kind of the basis of where that goes.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, so that's good to know. So if you suffer from both or you believe you suffer from both, you can file a claim for either or both of them, and VA should help you out with that. So let's hop into the next question. So let's say that VA does find that a veteran has both depression and anxiety. They're both diagnosed. Now, how does the veteran get a rating for each and then ultimately get a combined rating?
Sure. So this is the question that we get a lot, and it can take some untangling and some discussion with clients to kind of figure this one out. There's a couple of key principles to really keep in mind. One of them kind of goes with what I was talking about before, where VA rates pretty much every mental health condition, every mental health diagnosis under a general rating criteria that we'll talk about in a minute. So that's kind of where they're getting their list of disability severity and where all that's coming from. Now, the kind of principle for this is that given how the understanding of mental health conditions have changed over time, especially over lengths of long periods of time with these claims, uh, VA often thinks that there's too much overlap in these conditions and these symptoms, and that's why the rating criteria is set up the way that it is. So you'll get one rating typically that encompasses all of those psychiatric symptoms, and they'll then assign some kind of rating related to the severity and frequency, duration of those symptoms. Um, the kind of reason for this, or another reason for this, is VA has a kind of prohibition against doing what's called pyramiding. And pyramiding would be if a veteran receives compensation for the same symptoms. So, for example, a veteran is not going to be rated for depression and for an anxiety disorder under separate rating codes, especially if those symptoms are pretty much the same or they overlap. That would be pyramiding. They're getting paid twice for the same limitation, essentially. Now, I think where clients can run into trouble, where VA examiners can kind of fall short, is when you're going to and getting these VA exams, the compensation and pension exams. What's happening is there's a question in those exams that if a veteran has multiple psychiatric diagnoses, the examiner is supposed to talk about, okay, can I differentiate symptoms between diagnoses A and diagnoses B? And depending on the answer to that question and depending on how thorough or not the examiner's kind of reasoning and rationale was for that, that can either be very beneficial to veterans or it can be very harmful. I can't tell you the number of times where I've seen a veteran with multiple diagnoses, and the examiner says, all of the less severe symptoms are attributed to the service connected diagnoses, but they're not attributable to a non service connected one, like a PTSD in one case and depression in the other, for example. So that's often a point of attack. That's often something that we look at to try to help out our clients and help out veterans is if there is multiple conditions going on, can we attribute those symptoms to a service connected condition and hopefully raise that combined rating for them?
Yeah, and that's obviously pretty detailed. I mean, obviously it's pretty confusing because you're dealing with a mental health condition, and obviously, as you explained, Lucas, there's a lot of symptoms that could manifest, very similarly, but could potentially be for two separate diagnosed conditions. So that's really important and really interesting to know, and hopefully, information would be helpful for other individuals who are out there who might be suffering from a diagnosed depression condition or diagnosed anxiety as well. If you're trying to file a claim for compensations, this information is pretty helpful. So kind of taking us to our next point that I wanted to dive into a little bit with you, talking about, you can't pyramid. There's a number of symptoms that are sort of connected, but could be a little bit different depending on the veteran's diagnoses. So do you mind providing us with a little bit of detail of, how does VA or how would VA rate a veteran who suffers from both depression and anxiety?
Yeah, sure. So VA is going to look at a number of things. They're going to look at medical records that may be in the file or that you point them to. They're going to look at any lay testimony, whether that's statements or prior hearings, to look at that. And then they're going to take all that information. Maybe they'll schedule you for a VA exam or multiple VA exams. Then they're going to take that information and they're going to rate it based on what they believe your overall occupational and social impairment is. Now, this language has changed, quite a bit over the many decades that this has been around. Um, and there's a lot to this, but essentially the general rating criteria for psychiatric conditions breaks down into multiple levels. I won't read all the symptoms off for all of them because there's a lot. And importantly, for each bracket of symptomatology here, it's not an exhaustive list, meaning just because you may not have those symptoms for that particular area, but that doesn't mean you're not eligible for that like next highest rating. VA is going to rate your condition basically 0%, 30, 50, 70, or 100. And as you can imagine, as you kind of work your way up that schedule, the symptoms get more severe, the frequency, duration, severity get higher, get more pronounced. For example, the 0% rating recognizes that you have a disability that's related to service, but maybe there's minimal or no occupational or social impairment that they're able to find in the record for that. So they'll give you the service connection, but no disability rating. Kind of skipping ahead to say a 70% rating. 70% contemplates psychiatric symptoms that talk about an inability to work full time, difficulty adapting to, or performing activities of daily living, working in stressful work environments, things like that. And then the 100% rating, for example, is basically total occupational and social impairment. Your psychiatric symptoms are to such a degree that you are totally disabled for VA purposes. And that introduces other issues as well. But I would encourage veterans to look up that rating criteria and see if what symptoms they have, symptoms that are in their record, match with what their rating looks like, and then kind of go from there and kind of see where they're at.
Thanks, Lucas. That's really great information. I think that overall we can pretty much advise our clients and advise anybody who's seeking information. If you're suffering from a mental health condition and you're service connected for it, just know that VA is going to rate you or assign those ratings, as you had said, Lucas, a 0, 30, 50, 70, or 100, based on the overall occupational social impairment. But like Lucas has said, the list is pretty lengthy as far as the amount of symptoms and frequency of symptoms and the impacts on your activities of daily living. So we would strongly advise, as Lucas had stated, to take a look at the diagnostic code or take a look at the VA mental health ratings to sort of see or kind of give yourself an idea as to what you potentially could expect after you've attended a VA exam, and see, if you have a claim pending and sort of try to determine what you believe would be the appropriate rating. And then compare it to your exams. You have the right to request those exams, so get a copy of it and take a look. So I think we've hit on a lot of these things pretty generally, even though I think that this is a lot of good information that we've sort of discussed today. But there's obviously still a lot more detail about mental health that we haven't covered here. If you're a veteran who's suffering from a mental health condition and you are service connected for it, or do believe you should be service connected for it, we strongly advise you to check out cck-law.com. Take a look at our other videos so you can learn more about anxiety, depression, the claims or appeals that are associated with both of those conditions, or even more specifically if you suffer from PTSD as well, because VA is going to rate you for one mental health condition and then assign the appropriate rating based on your symptoms thereafter. Remember, be honest and detailed about your condition. I know we had referenced your VA exams. Those are going to be the most important pieces of the claim or the appeals process. It's going to give you the opportunity to really lay out to the VA examiner just what impact this mental health or these mental health conditions have on your daily life. Just remember to be detailed and be honest about your condition. The more honest you can be with your VA examiner, the more clear of a disability picture you can paint for VA, ultimately when it comes time for VA to render a decision on your claim. And we also want to advise, seeking help for mental health is a sign of strength. It's not a weakness. If you're a veteran who is struggling with anxiety or depression, please know that you are not alone. Reach out to a mental health professional and consider filing a claim or an appeal to help get you the benefits you need. And as always, if you have any questions or requests for other videos, please leave a comment on this video. Lucas, thank you for going over this information with me. It's a lot of detailed stuff, so hopefully this has kind of taught people out there what VA has available for you and just kind of give them a little bit of insight as to what you can expect if you're going through the claims process for a psych condition. Thank you again, and take care.